G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to another edition of SuperCoach Edge, of course, BBL edition, and let's have a quick look at how we fared coming out of round 7. So there we go, we ended up scoring a 1,076. I thought it was above par, but only slightly, because as you can see here, hilariously so, I actually only went up one spot in rank to go from 589th to 588th. Overall, I was hoping to at least try and hit around about the 350 mark heading into round 8, but not to be, but it is what it is. Thankful here, though, that my team value has gone up to 2,573,200, which is pretty juicy, and it means that I have a little bit of money to play with across the final 2 rounds, just in terms of getting in the high value prospects, the more, I guess, primo guns, which will be pretty handy. Let's move into my team specifically and see how it fared. So as you can see here, the big standout is, of course, McDermott on the bench with a 141. He did have the emergency, and of course, with the Hurricanes playing their double, it made it super awkward in terms of looping. So obviously, the first game, McDermott actually didn't play too well. Actually, I might bring it up here if we can do it, just to sort of give you a little bit of context here. And he actually only scored a 16, so I wasn't going to lock that in. And for me, I'll just go back to my team, and you would have seen, or at least heard, my strategy in the previous episode. My plan was, because he was playing before Maxwell, I saw, okay, Maxwell was playing first, scored a 65. And usually for me, on a double game round at least, given Maxi was only in a single, if you score above 55, I'll lock it in automatically. So given that, locked in Maxwell, used Salzman, who ended up being one of my trade-in non-playing players for the round, used him to loop on Maxwell's score, and then I saw McDermott score pretty shit in his first game. So I did have the option there of potentially doing a bit of a switching Inglis down into the batters category, putting him on field, and then using some DPP switches to switch a batsman into the bowlers category. But and then obviously as well using a trade to bring in a non-playing player, wicketkeeper / batsman, in order to put McDermott's score on field. So I didn't need to do that. Only scored a 16 or thereabouts, McDermott, and I thought, okay, well, he's not going to score. Chances are he's not going to score mammoth in the second game against the Strikers. But he did that, of course. Ended up scoring, 126 or whatever it was, and ended up absolutely smashing it. Combined score of 141, and yeah, that was bloody annoying. So missed out on his score, but aside from him, I actually did pretty well. Looking at the other scores, Whiteman, he was my other trade-in option as well. I brought him in just to activate that wicketkeeper batsman DPP swing, just because I didn't have it after trading out Philippi a few rounds ago. So it means now that I do have the option of swinging McDermott down to the batsman category, potentially playing him off the bench or playing him on field, depending on when the Hurricanes play. They, of course, play first up in round 8, and I'll delve into this in a little moment, but could potentially leave McDermott on the bench in either the wicketkeepers category or the batsman on the bench, and then, assess how he goes and potentially loop his score on field. So I think a lot of people will be doing that, if not playing him on field outright. Aside from McDermott, though, not too bad. As I said, Maxwell was the second highest score off the bench, which ended up looping on. And aside from him, Whiteman, 46, wouldn't have helped me in any way, shape or form in terms of outscoring any other batsman. Actually scored the same as Hardy, funnily enough. And then Soiners, 34, and Sanger, a 44. Both those guys ended up scoring or outscoring Ty, of course. Andrew Ty was rested in the second game for the Scorchers for the round, which was frustrating. Didn't think that was going to happen, considering he didn't get a rest in this sort of relevant fixture or equivalent fixture last season. But I guess with the Scorchers already having locked in a final spot from memory, it means now that they can afford to rest a few of their, top tier players. So that was frustrating. Owners of Berendorf obviously felt the same as well. He was rested in the first game, and then he came out and smashed it in the second game. This bloke here, Richo. So I'll work in reverse and go through. Start with the bowlers, of course, considering now I've already delved into it. But Richo, he is virtually just a shadow of his former self. He's been one of the more reliable, if not the best, pace bowler when he's at the top of his game in the BBL of years gone by, seasons gone by. But he, since returning from his, was it back injury or whatever he had, the ailment that he had, might have been hamstring, soft tissue related, not too sure, can't remember. But since coming back, this entire season, he's had maybe one good game. And aside from that, he's kind of been very, very ordinary. And you'd think on a double, Richo come out to play, absolutely fire, minimum of 100 combined score. Just wasn't to be. And again, he's in the firing line for me in terms of trade-out options heading into round 8, just because, again, he's not the bowling that he's having, the form that he's in. He's not the same player, so I don't think I'll back him in. But the only reason I'd be keeping him is just purely based on his name and historically knowing how much of a good player he is. But maybe it's just one of those off seasons for him. Moving on to Ellis, he was my early trade-in option a couple of rounds back, and I think I mentioned in the previous episode that if I didn't have him in my team, I'd kind of be 50-50 on bringing him in, and I'm glad that I actually did because he ended up scoring a 121, as you can see there. Stoinis played first up, 34, wasn't going to lock that score in on a single game, and likewise Sanger as well, outscored Stoinis by an extra 10 points to the tune of 44, that's kind of what it is. All these guys here had doubles, Bartlett, Kuhneman, Ty, Richo, and Ellis, so none of these single game players was really going to factor into it unless they went crazy to the tune of McDermott. Moving on to Bartlett, he was my big trade-in option. Again, I traded him in early last round, in round 6, and he ended up being one of my best scorers. In fact, he was my highest scorer overall with a 149, and I think he's leading the competition for the most wickets at the moment. So if you jumped on him, you'd be very, very happy. I think a few might have. Actually, no, he's only in 10% of teams. Very surprised at that. So it was a relative pod in that respect there, considering a lot of people were 20% upwards for ownership with those double game players that I'm referring to. So again, the big thing here is dot balls 19, economy rate bonus, obviously wickets, 5 wickets across the 2 games, took a catch, and had a little bit of a hit with the bat to the tune of 2 runs, but 149 was very, very handy. Kuhneman, he was kind of my prize recruit. Big thing with him, as you would have seen, is in 16% of teams, but previous to round 7, the big thing with him was he's not only dot ball, but economy rate bonus, which is pretty good if it was a single game round. Considering it was a double game round, he kind of scored the way that he has been on single games, so was a little bit disappointing in that respect. And I think he dropped in price, only slightly, 2.4k. So not too bad, but I was expecting bigger things from the Coon. Moving on to the batsman category, and Matt Short, 66. He went up in price, surprisingly. So I think you got to keep him for the remainder of the season. Don't think about getting rid of him unless you're really strapped for cash. But even then, I'd be looking to get rid of the guys of before him, of Hardy, Walter, Overton even. But we'll get into the trades in a moment. Walter, he was my VC option. I think he scored around about 77 from memory in the first game of their double, and then came out and butted up and finished with a 132. Locked in his VC score after the first game and was very happy with him, considering he was my second high scorer behind Bartlett. Overton, I originally, as you would have seen in the previous episode, I actually traded him out. And then I reversed that trade when, who was out? I did reverse the trade. I can't recall at what point. I think it was because I had a spare trade up my sleeve, and I ended up trading Connolly. That's what it was. So there's a few layers to this. Connolly, I thought he was going to be dropped after the first game or potentially pushed down the order even further. Wasn't being given overs either. Sorry, I should say after round 6, heading into round 7. So I ended up trading Connolly, which was absolutely stupid because he ended up scoring around about 100 odd. And I traded him to Whiteman, who I figured may be potentially in jeopardy of losing his spot over the remaining 2 rounds and might be a handy DPP loophole player, but at the very least provides an extra option. And that cashing in of Connolly to Whiteman gave me an extra 20k, I think it was. So yeah, that helped me in that respect there, just to build the bank a little bit more. But yeah, it kind of shot my foot in terms of that. And it meant that I had some cash left over as well. And with Connolly not being on field, which is kind of my original plan, I thought, stuff it, I'll reverse the trade on my other trade and bring Overton back in, just because he's been one of the more in-form all-rounders for this season. So thankful of that, obviously. He was my, third high scorer, 123, and glad that I got him for the remainder of the season, especially considering, if you look at the fixture here, Adelaide play first up in round 8, and then round 9, they also play first up. So there is an option there of potentially looping him if you wanted to do that, but I don't think I will, considering his form has been pretty good and he's an all-rounder. So yeah, aside from that though, very, very handy reverse trade back in. And then we had, of course, spoke to Maxwell, 65 Lutti score on field via Salesman, who was my other trade in. And then Hardy, 46. Some people went for him as their C option. Down in form, considering especially on a double. But as we know, look at the previous rounds, and he's been very, very handy with the bat. Actually rolled the arm over as well, surprisingly, across the double game round in round 7. So I think people may be quick to get rid of him, but for me, I'm still keen to back him in. He's been one of the more, I guess, reliable batsmen, even when he hasn't been bowling. So to score 84, 88, in I think one of those was a double, round 6 was a double game round, but like round 3, single game, to score an 88 without really bowling. I think he bowled maybe an over or 2, if that. Hobart, again, single game round, all that sort of stuff. I think that was single game. But yeah, he's the sort of guy that's reliable. I think you can rely on in the single game rounds like we have in round 8. Whiteman, spoke to him, 46. Hopefully he gets dropped, because it'd be very, very handy as a bit of a loophole option. If McDermott goes well, could swing Inglis down into the batsman category and then use Whiteman as the non-playing player loophole option to loop on McDermott's score. That's virtually how things stand and coming out of round 7. So let's turn our attention to round 8. And I spoke of it just then. It is a unique round because it's one of the few rounds where every single team is playing a single game. So it's no double game rounds at all. Round 9, of course, if you want to plan for that. The last round of the SuperCoach BBL season, Thunder have a double game. So if you want to sort of plan for that, you can keep that in mind in terms of targeting Thunder players. But yeah, at this point of the season, especially, and the Thunder haven't been the most reliable in terms of the top scoring players or top scoring team across the season. So you could deviate from the usual plan of loading up on double game players when it comes to the Thunder for round 9. So that's kind of my thinking around that. Gives a little bit of an insight into my thinking, which is getting in the best single game round players first and foremost, and then kind of building out around that. Getting in, double game players that I'm missing. And the big one that I'm obviously missing here is Daniel Sams. Was thankful that I actually traded him out heading into round 7, because he actually only scored 3, believe it or not. Didn't get really a shot at the bat. Went out cheaply, and bowling wise didn't get a wicket. And economy rate was actually in the negative. So that was handy. Went down 7.5k. Obviously comes into this round with a huge break even, but I guess factoring that in, if you wanted to live dangerously, and maybe if you don't have the cash to bring in other guys, you could potentially hold off on getting Sams this round, and then maybe he'll drop in cash heading into the double game round for the Thunder in round 9. But I'm not willing to risk it. And at 216k, and as we know, he had that big game on the double, it was, I think, from memory, in round 4. Scored a 172, and then prior to that, 155, which was on a single. So we know what he can produce, and he's due, well overdue. When a player has a down round, they're, as I always say, a step closer to turning their form around. So he is someone that I'm targeting straight up, 100%, not deviating from that plan. So I just need to work out from here as to which guys I trade out and which guys, more importantly, I want to keep. So I do want to keep Inglis He's been one of the more reliable wicketkeeper batsmen for the season. As you can see here, kind of speaks for itself. So he's 100% staying in my team. McDermott, you could live dangerously if you really wanted to, but coming off the back of a bloody 141 score, and collective runs of 111 in a double game round, I think it'd be silly to try and fade him. Worked his way into form as well, as you can see here over the previous 3 rounds. So I'm keeping him. Matt Short, spoke to him, keep him, don't stuff around, the best all-rounder in the game, arguably. Paul Walter, again, all-rounder, VC option for me last round, delivered the goods, keep him. Just keep in mind as well, depending on how many Heat players you have, the Heat are actually on a bye in the final round of next round in round 9. So you could, if you have too many Heat players, start to move them on, which I'd probably recommend to do. I've only got 3. I'm looking to potentially move on one of those, just so I'm not kind of stuck in a rut and dictated by, I guess, the price point of, Walter, Bartlett, and Kuhnemann, if I was to keep all those guys heading into round 9. So I am thinking of potentially getting rid of one of these guys, and it'd have to be Kuhnemann, just because he's the guy who hasn't been in form. Wouldn't be silly enough to trade Walter, Tall Paul, or the X-Man in Bartlett. So keeping those guys. Overton, I'll keep. Very, very good. Rewarded me with my reverse trade. Spoke to Aaron Hardy. You could potentially trade him out if you need some cash, but I want to try and keep him if I can. Maxi, I think it speaks for itself. Don't trade Maxwell. Absolute gun. Whiteman, if you needed to, you could, but he's not worth enough dough to really move to anyone of note, unless you're trading him to a non-playing player, 42k type, like a salesman or a burden from the Heat. Bartlett, obviously keep, as I said. Kuhnemann, he's my second option to trade out. AJ Ty, I'm going to keep, especially with my thoughts, because the Scorchers have rested both Ty and Berendorf over the previous 2 games. Next in line, I reckon they're going to rest Jai Richardson, just because of the fact that, first and foremost, he's been out of form, but because they've already rested their other 2 first choice pace options, he's next in line to be given a rest, and he hasn't been in the best form, which I spoke about. So I think he is kind of a given that he's going to be given a rest for me anyway, I think. So I'm going to be using him as my third trade out option, and mainly because I want to keep Ellis as well playing first up. Could potentially use him to put on the bench and loop him off the bench. So that's my thoughts around that. So I'm going to be using, as I said, trading out the likes of Kuhnemann, Richo, and who was the other one? Oh, I didn't speak to the other one. Sorry. The other one I should be trading is, I think, Stoinis. Could trade Sanger, but of course he's got the double coming up next round. Stoinis for me, of no use really for me this round, because he's playing the last game. Round 9, he'd have a little bit more use playing the second game against Hobart. But just thinking in terms of being able to loop off the bench, because this time of year and having loophole plays is probably where it becomes most important. And yeah, Stoinis isn't really going to be of any use to me. I wouldn't be able to screen his score, and because he's only really had the 1 or 2 good games across the season, I'm not confident in playing him on field ahead of these other guys here. So he's my other option to trade out, and he's kind of that middle ground. 100k will be of some use if I wanted to trade him to another Thunder player potentially for next round, or, which is kind of my thought at this stage, trading him to another loophole player in that guy that I spoke of before from the Heat in Burden, who won't be getting a game and will be probably more of use as a loophole option to loop someone's score off the bench. And he is, of course, a batsman bowler as well, Burden. So we'll be able to be of use across both the batsman and bowlers category. The other reason why I'm thinking, and I'll probably a bit of a segue here as to why I'm thinking of going down that route with Burden as another second non-playing player, is the fact that Salzman from the Thunder, because he is from the Thunder, in round 9, the Thunder have the first game of the round. So it does mean that he's not going to be of any use to me in terms of using him as a loophole option. So he's null and void and will be on the bench for next round. So I do need another loophole option, especially if I'm going to go down the route of, putting the VC on a Sams, or, if I wanted to live dangerously and go contrarian and put it on maybe a Matt Short. I'd need someone outside of the Thunder's team, and obviously Adelaide as well, to help me with the loophole option. And Brisbane Heat, as I said, they've got the bye in round 9. So a perfect loophole option there. So we'll go with that. We'll do the trades. So we'll do them all at once. That might be easier. Richo, Kuderman. And like I said, first and foremost, let's not stuff around. Let's bring Sam's in. Alrighty. The other guy that I'm looking at is someone who's in the batsman category. So I'd need to swing one of these guys down into the bowlers. So we might go... we'll need to work out who we swing down in terms of who plays first if we wanted to sort of loop guys off the bench. So we'll fix up that at the moment, but we'll just go with Hardy for the time being. Switch him to the bowlers. And we're going to go in terms of the man that just retired from Test cricket, Davey Warner, 125k. For me, and he's in 1.5% of teams. A lot of those people would have obviously brought him into their teams in round 7 if they needed a loophole. With Davey Warner, he's going to play the final round 9 for the double for the Thunder, which is super handy. For this round, just keep note on this. So whilst I'm bringing him into my team at the moment, he is actually at his brother's wedding. I'm pretty sure it's the same day as the night that the Thunder are playing their game this round. So they've hilariously said that he's going to get a chopper from his brother's wedding to the game in order to get to the game in time. I don't know if that's going to go to plan. It kind of seems so outlandish and silly because, first and foremost, Davey Warner, you're retired, mate. Let your hair down, get on the piss, and just celebrate. You're at your brother's wedding. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you picking cricket, like a T20 game, a BBL game, over your brother's wedding? But anyway, you do you, boo-boo. So if he doesn't obviously get to play, I'll have to reverse that trade some way, shape, or form. And go for another player, potentially go for another Thunder player, but we'll stick with Davey Warner there. And then in terms of the cash that I've left over, it's only 97.4k. So we'll go and have a look at what's available at that price point, which won't be much. I'll give you the hot tip. And we'll just scroll down. So I could bring in a Gurinder Sandhu. Not a big fan of him, especially with his form. Wes Agar hasn't been in Adelaide's side. Stickety, I'm not going to even speak to him. He burnt me. Not Paris, not Presswidge. Hatcher I could bring in. Has gone down a fair bit in Doe. But for good reason. Hasn't been in good form at all. So I'll probably be avoiding him. Corey Anderson hasn't been in good form either. Likewise Zampa, Sidlno. None of these guys I really like at all. So I'd need to do another switcheroo potentially. So let's just have a look in the, or if I wanted to go for a batsman, 97.4. Not a fan of Jewel. I'd maybe look at Ollie Davies, but I wouldn't be able to afford him. Could go for a Tom Collar Cadmore. I think that's how you pronounce his name, from the Thunder, but no. Tim David hasn't been in good enough form. Who else is there? And that's pretty much it. Yep, that's pretty much it. So yeah, that kind of leads me to thinking I'll need to go for, just because I can't afford any decent guys, I'd need to bring in a non-playing player anyway. So with that, let's do it. Let's bring in, we'll switch Overton back there, just because we want to loop in the batsman category and we want to loop in the bowlers category. So let's bring in Burden, and if I scroll down here, the most traded in, we go to the top 1%, and they're obviously clued in. These are the second most traded in player, Burden, as a non-playing player. which is again speaks to that strategy of bringing in a loophole option to be able to loop players off the bench, especially on a single game week. As you can see here, Sam's most traded in. Burden, as I said. Davey Warner, third most traded in. Hales, just a word of warning with Hales, even though his break-even is very, very small and he started to sort of hit his straps and be in good form, he actually twinged his calf. He said in the broadcast in the previous game. By reports, he's in line to play, but I'm not keen to take the gamble on him, even if he does play. So, Hales, I'll wait on you, mate. Chris Green is the other one I'm thinking of to bring in early, but I'll afford to wait as well. As you can see there, most traded out players. Richo, no surprise. Andrew Ty, I'm going to back in just because he's that traditional death bowler. Bowls in the last couple of overs of the game. And, as we know, can pick up those really cheap wickets. Aaron Hardy, third most traded out. Bartlett, which I wouldn't be doing at this stage, and Kuhneman. But the other thing to think of with the Brisbane Heat as well is the fact that I think they've qualified now for top 2, or at least they qualified for the finals anyway. And even though they got the bye in round 9, the next round, they could potentially use this as an opportunity to rest a player and give them some extra rest. I don't know if they will because it's kind of flirting with form, but just keep that in mind as well, as you may need to reverse a trade and potentially trade out a Brisbane player or rely on someone that's playing on the bench. But for me, as I said, Burden, let's get him, mate. Let's get him. He will be sought by lowest price. And there is 1.8. And the reason I'm going for Burden is it kind of speaks for itself, but as a batsman bowler, he's the lowest price batsman bowler that you can get in your team. And as a non-playing player, always like to go for a DPP player just because it allows that flexibility to swing things around if need be. So Burden, he'll come in, leaves me at 55.4k in the kit. We'll go complete trades. There we go, confirm. And that's how my team looks at the moment. The other option I'm thinking of doing is if I'm not going for Davey Warner, for example, I could potentially look at getting in another, single game player that I'd love to have in my team. And it probably comes from the Sixers. So for those people I haven't heard as yet, but Tom Curran, he has been ruled out for the last 2 rounds of the season because he has sustained a knee injury. So that does elevate the prospects of both Abbott and Edwards as well. But the thing is with Edwards, and I guess Abbott as well, they're both around a similar price point, 178.6k. Abbott's a little bit cheaper, 152.5. Break even at 81. Hasn't been in the best form, but has been, I think, for the past 2 years running, the biggest wicket taker for the previous 2 seasons. So he is due to turn around his form. Sydney Smash as well. Is he normally lap it up? He has the 2 games prior to the most recent game this year. He's actually performed quite well. But the other one is, obviously Edwards, just because of the fact that he is a DPP player, has had a bit of a hit with the bat, looked good, and looked good with the ball as well. Didn't get much of an opportunity in the previous game, but without Curran there, I think they're going to have to rely upon him even more so. So I'd be expecting him to score around about the 40 mark upwards. Likewise Abbott as well. But won't be obviously be able to afford either of those guys unless I trade out someone of a higher price point. Potentially, I probably wouldn't. No, I'd need to get rid of someone like a Hardy or Overton or a Walter. So, and I value those guys a bit more. So I think I'll stick with the way things are at the moment. And we'll just have a look in terms of what we can do with swings off the bench, and then of course look at the VC and the C. Actually, let's do the VC and the C first because it's pretty straightforward. Shorty, the Messiah, M Short, stands for Matt Short, but also Messiah Short. He is the hands down VC option here. If he goes well, like the C on your non-playing player, and hunky dory. So that's pretty much that. If Short doesn't go well, I'll be looking at Potentially, can't go Overton because he's obviously playing the first game as well. Maybe a Walter, but tough game against Perth at Optus Stadium. Again, Bartlett maybe, but again, tough game. Could go for Sams in the Sydney Smash. Actually hasn't scored well historically against the Sixers. But as I say, it means that they're one step closer to being due. As you can see, on a single game week, that's where captains and VCs are even more important, just because there's no standout player from a double, aside from the Messiah and Short. So that's kind of where you can get your point of difference. But I wouldn't go too cheeky with the VC. Don't overthink it. Put it on Short, because you'd hate to not be on him if he absolutely smashes it. And if he doesn't, it gives you that other opportunity to go different anyway, because people are going to be forced to go for, as I said, a Walter, a Sams, a Bartlett, any of these guys to really make up points. And yeah, everyone's going to be going contrarian, I think. Alrighty, so that's pretty much the VC and the C. Let's work out who we can loop off the bench, or at least screen their score, see what their score is after they've played, and then loop their score on field potentially as well. So my thought here is Maxi's going to come on field, because I'm pretty well stacked as well. As you can see here, it does afford me the opportunity to, if I wanted to, reverse a trade and instead trade in, if I have McDermott on the bench in the wicketkeepers category, I can potentially do a bit of a sneaky, reverse the trade of Burden, which will go back to Stoinis, and then trade him to a non-playing wicketkeeper, which would be like a, who could it be? Harper from the Stars. I don't think he'll be playing the remainder of the season after copying his head knock, at a guess, but yeah, I could potentially bring him in, put Inglis into the batsman category, and then swing around and work out who I can trade in, trade out. But yeah, that's kind of one sort of strategy in round. What I might do here is, I don't really want to, I could potentially be, considering the strikers are playing first, I could maybe loop on Overton off the bench, but I think it might be a bit of a waste. I reckon at this stage, in terms of these guys here that I've got, that I'm kind of least confident in, it'd probably have to be Davey Warner, just because of the fact that he, obviously coming from a test format to, BBL T20, it's a different pace. It speaks for itself in terms of the way that you bat. So, and especially coming off of his brother's wedding, he might be a bit dusty. So what I'll do here is put Davey Warner on the bench with the E. Salzman isn't going to really work here because he's obviously playing the first of the same game as Warner. So this is where the other non-playing player comes into effect, and he's very handy here. So Burden obviously plays the game after the Thunder. So it means then I could use this to my advantage. If Warner scores well, I'll leave Burden on field. If not, then it means that I put Whiteman on field. What I can do here is do this. So that works. So if Ellis scores like shit, I can then bring Sanger on and leave Salzman there if Ellis scores well. And then here, as you can see here, Burden on field if Warner scores well. If Warner scores shit, otherwise I can go McDermott for Whiteman. So I'm not going to play. I wouldn't want to play Whiteman. Put the E on McDermott, plays first up. And then if McDermott scores like shit, I put Warner on field. And then what will that afford me? But again, I'm not as confident with Warner coming out and smashing it. So, and I don't really want to play McDermott on field if I can't help it, because I think a lot of people will field him off the back of him playing a big game, and it might be a bit of a point of difference there if I have him on the bench, just in case he scores poorly. I think Ellis, it's kind of the speaks for itself there. All these other guys I'm kind of happy with. And this affords me as well, if Ellis scores shit, there's a couple of options. I play Sanger, or I swing someone like an Overton down into the bowlers. And I've got a couple of options here where I can, if McDermott scores well, use Salzman, and then I'll be putting Warner. It's kind of the same thing, but just another way that I can do things. But yeah, that's pretty much that. I think I might prefer to do this way, and then if I need to reverse a trade to bring in a non-playing wicketkeeper batsman, and then swing Inglis down into the batsman category in order to loop on McDermott's score, I'd be more willing to do that, and maybe hold off on getting a Warner this week or something. So yeah, but we will put Burden back into... There we go, just reversing. So I think that's kind of what I'll be rolling with. Yeah, because then the luxury here, if I have McDermott on the bench, scores well, I can potentially reverse a trade, or the trade that I was going to get used for Burden, I'll use to swing around and then put the non-playing wicketkeeper here. Inglis comes down into the batsman category, and it means then that I don't use Warner, which is fine, and then I'll look to bring Warner in next round, and then use that extra trade to, maybe stick with the Burden, and maybe only bring Sams in. Maybe Sams and Burden, non-playing player, and another non-playing player, wicketkeeper. Who knows? But it provides me a little bit of flexibility here. And sorry, it was stupid enough for me to not say it. But Glenn Maxwell, he's the other option, obviously, as well, in round 8 as the captain option, which is kind of the road that I'd be going down if Short doesn't play well. But that's pretty much it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, of course, and if you have enjoyed our content across the course of the BBL SuperCoach season, feel free to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and be on the lookout, because we are kicking into action when it comes to AFL SuperCoach very, very soon. Liam and I are reconvening. We're teaming up. We're doing the old...
You son of a bitch.
We're going to be doing that, joining forces, and getting back into all things AFL SuperCoach, which we're very, very excited for. So only 2 rounds of the season left in BBL SuperCoach. It has been a bit of fun. Hopefully we can move into the top 250. That's kind of the aim at this stage. We'll see how we go, but that's how my team sits going into round 8. If you have any questions or comments, as usual, feel free to hit us up on Twitter or X at supercoach_edge, or feel free to leave your comments below in the comment section here. Alrighty, and we'll catch you in the next episode, which will be the last round of BBL SuperCoach, of course, and we'll catch you then. Same time, same place. We'll see you then. Cheers.